Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrology with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm very excited yet again. I'm very excited today because I have Danielle Blackwood with me. And I have just started reading her book and first chapter, and I'm already really very excited about what I'm reading. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, Anna.
Well, I love the title of your book, and I think that's where we're going to start. A Lantern in the Dark, Story, Ritual, and Sacred Astrology. Tell us more.
Sure, yeah. Basically, one of the reasons that I started writing this book is because my clients would be coming to me at always at certain ages, and I would say, okay, wow, you're having your Saturn return or you're in your midlife transits, and they'd be at a crossroad, and I'd think, okay, so I would give them personal rituals, therapeutic ritual, and guided meditations to get through those times, maybe some plant medicine suggestions. And then I decided I should just put all of this material into a book so it can be accessible for people in one spot. So that's what I did. And the book itself is meant to be sort of a lantern in the dark when people come to those crossroad times that we all come to around the same ages. In astrology, there are significant rites of passage that we all come to. There's the first Saturn return, you start feeling it on your horizon around 27, 28, and then you're really in it around 29, 30. And I think that anyone who's past that age can attest that that probably was a tumultuous time where they also learned a lot and really, stepped up to the plate to get on with the next chapter of their life. And then I talk also about in the book the midlife transits, which are approximately between the ages of around 37 and mid to late 40s. And then finally, the whole book is wrapped up with the second Saturn return that happens to people around the ages of 58 to 60. So, as you probably know, maybe not everyone out there knows, but the Saturn return essentially means that Saturn returns to the place that it was at your birth by degree and sign. And that happens approximately every 30 years. And Saturn is about things like stepping up to the plate. Like I said, it's the reality principle, rolling up your sleeves and getting to work. But it can also come with some real challenges and prompt you to really need to step into having a good, deep life review. So hopefully that answered your question, sort of.
It does. I was just thinking about Saturn and a conversation I had with a client about 2 or 3 weeks ago who's coming up to her second Saturn return.
Right.
And I was explaining to her what it meant and that it's a stepping up of responsibility as well. And
Mhm.
it really came to me very forcibly that that second Saturn return, if the first one is about becoming an adult, the second
Mm.
one is about becoming an elder. And people get wrapped up in this notion of it being about aging. But I think that's such a waste of that Saturn energy because, and the reason it's there is because in our society, we prize elders so little. And yet it is that harvesting of all of that accumulated wisdom and skill. And we should be looking at this as a very important second rite of passage, where we're going from adulthood to being an elder. And it should be that we're respecting that and valuing it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Um, in my book, I know you haven't had a chance to dive into it yet too much, but the first Saturn return, I use the story of Vasilisa the Beautiful from the Slavic folktale. Um, and so it is very much a coming of age story and how she goes to the Baba Yaga's house to seek the light to bring back to the family to light the fire. And I think that that really illustrates that sort of stepping into adulthood and doing what one needs to do, passing those tests before they're able to carry that light. And then I flipped the story for the second Saturn return, and I told it from the Baba Yaga's perspective as the wise old woman who lives at the edge of the woods. And I actually thought, I've always, it's never sat well with me that she was always called a wicked old witch who eats people. That's, you know, what they would say in a lot of the stories that are about her. And I thought that's just so typical. And it's kind of what society does to people, women especially, I do think, after they get to a certain age. It's like, what, and what knowledge do you have to share? And I think there, Baba Yaga has come to this place where she has a knowledge of all of the cycles by the time she gets to the second Saturn return. So that's kind of the way I'm balancing the stories in the book. So I think it's really cool, even if somebody is just at their first Saturn return, to also read the second Saturn return story, because they're both connected. I feel that Vasilisa and Baba Yaga are just like two sides of the same coin. Baba Yaga was once this young ingenue, you know, this young person stepping into creating an adulthood on her own terms. And yeah, so I just found that really fascinating, that
I
connection.
I also, as I said, just getting into your first chapter, the words betwixt and between jumped out at me. Partly also because not only am I psychological astrologer, but I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. And
Right.
so that role, the betwixt and between, is one that I'm very familiar with. So tell us about that in your context.
Yes. Sure. So I do feel like when people do step into these thresholds, the first and second Saturn return, and also the midlife transits, that they are kind of betwixt and between. They're not exactly who they used to be, but they're not quite yet who they're becoming. So they're in that liminal space. And I think that although these times are psycho-spiritual thresholds that can bring challenge and confusion, there are also these magical spaces where there there is so much potential, where people can drop down and create the life that they want to live, and really listen to what their soul is calling them towards. So that's betwixt and between in a nutshell for me. And I also talk about the dark wood, and how I do think that when people are sort of just stepping into these rites of passage, that they quite often do feel, at least at the beginning, that they're stepping into that proverbial dark wood of fairy tale. So they feel like nothing really feels real. They don't know which direction to go. They can't quite find their feet. But I think that trusting and just being attentive and reflective can be some of the most powerful medicine that people can use during these times.
You talked about ritual and ritual as part of healing. Tell us about how you're linking that with astrology.
Yes. Okay. So I'm big on therapeutic ritual. I'm a registered counselor, and I do find that it can be. I mean, we use ritual for so many things in our lives. We get married, it's a ritual. If someone dies, there's a ritual connected to that as well. And I think that using ritual to navigate these crossroad times can be very therapeutic. It can be very powerful and cathartic. And so what I did is I used the motifs, the archetypal connections of those astrological crossroads, and wove them into rituals that would pertain to something that someone might be going through during that time.
So can you give us an example?
Oh, an exact. Can I pick up my book for a second here? Um, let's see. Well, actually, I'll just speak to that. So for the first Saturn return, um, I really, it is like crossing a threshold. I think it's crossing that threshold from being a younger person in your sort of devil may care 20s, and stepping into that new aspect of self as one becomes 30. I know that the ages sort of, they're not really specific. I mean, I think that people are still integrating their Saturn return into their early 30s. But so I have a threshold crossing ritual that I used for that chapter. And then for the Pluto square chapter, which happens between around 37 and 40, depending on the time that a person is born. um, I have a ritual of the looking into a dark mirror to do shadow work, because shadow work is a theme that often does come up with the Pluto square. People are really grappling with a lot of things just kind of coming up from the unconscious, emerging and becoming conscious. So I think that that one aligns with that quite well. What else can I think of? The second Saturn return, the ritual that I use for that is taking on the mantle of authority and maturity, and being able to step gracefully into one's power and one's knowing, having lived through all of these previous cycles.
I love that, the stepping into the mantle. I like that very, very much. I think that that's very beautiful. Um, Part of your title has the words sacred astrology. So
Yes.
tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So, um, at its heart, sacred astrology is spirit expressing itself through archetype and story, in my opinion. I think that it weaves together the psycho-spiritual language of the cosmos, the mysteries of the changing seasons, and depth psychology perspectives. So I think that this can help us cultivate a deeper connection with the transpersonal. Um, I think also I like, with what I mean by sacred astrology is I take psychological archetypal astrology, blending it with evolutionary astrology, and then also bringing this other layer that is the variation of light, the changing of the seasons, magic. So that's essentially what I mean when I say sacred astrology. So I think that it can help us deepen our self-awareness and tune into the numinous, and really bring a sense of magic and mystery that exists beneath the mundane. So, in a nutshell, that is what I think of sacred astrology. And I also think it is almost more of a spiritual path, or part of a guiding philosophy in that regard.
Yes, I would agree, and I think that for many of us who practice astrology, there is a very much an awareness of the magic of
Mhm.
synchronicity and the old axiom of as above, so below, and that connection to something bigger than us can only be
Mhm.
described as magical. That is the beauty of it. The very fact that it is a mirror into which we look to better understand ourselves, to understand what is happening to us. And if it's magical, then there is indeed something sacred about it, which is
Mhm.
it's vital because that means that we enter into the spirit of that consultation in a most respectful and humble way. I'm very intrigued by the um, use of plants in this context also. So yeah, tell us what you're doing with plants.
Oh, plants. I love plant medicine. So I live on an acreage and on a little island on the west coast of Canada, and I've got a enormous witch's garden. Is and it's I've got all sorts of healing plants, as well as some of the other plants like datura and henbane and things like that. I just love to grow them. But I really think that there is a deep connection between plant medicine and astrology. There's a lot of correspondences there. So I used plant medicine in the book sort of as a way of navigating some of these crossroads. Being able to, so for instance, with the first Saturn return, again, I would say a lot of people tend to, not everyone, but some people tend to feel very sober, depressed even. And so using natural ways to work with that, sort of like St. John's wort, for instance. Let me just open my book for a second here and get my glasses, and I will
I was thinking
just
about
dive into it. Pardon?
actually. I was
What's
thinking
that?
about John's wort when you talk
Yes.
about Saturn, because it is known to help with low spirits, shall we say.
Yes, yes, and that can be one of the things that does crop up, I think, during the Saturn return. I mean, again, not always, but I do think most of the time people do have that real turning within. They feel maybe low spirited or low energy even. So that's so I do have St. John's wort, lemon balm, milky oats, ginseng for bringing back more vitality, more chi, more energy, ginkgo biloba. Oh my goodness, there's so many here. I'll just read a few. So yeah, holy basil. And now for the, I would just, as a sort of a different take on it, the Uranus opposition, which when we are in the Uranus opposition between approximately 42 and 44, we feel wired quite often, restless. We can't really quite, you know, just is this all this energy coming up. So I think that people can really benefit from slowing down a little bit. And I was just going to try to find that for you and just read a few, just a few, just a second. I'm almost there. There we go. So for the Uranus opposition, yes, of course, skullcap, wood betony, they're both nervines, so that they calm the nervous system. Passion flower is another one. I think motherwort can also be very helpful. And yeah, so taking care of your nervous system and your adrenals is really important during all the time actually, but during the Uranus opposition, people can really need to just come down a little bit and ground and center, and plant medicine can be helpful.
I love that. It's interesting because you're talking about the physical aspect of astrology, and you're thinking about the supporting the mood, shall we say, by looking at the nervous system, etc., which is very inspiring. Have you been thinking about the traditional pairings of certain plants with certain planets?
I kept a little bit of that in mind, of course, when I was doing the research for the different transits, but I also took it into consideration to look at sort of the symptoms, if you will, that people experience during these times. And yeah, so I think that I leaned more towards that, but I did also bear in mind the traditional pairing. So I have Culpeper, of course, sitting on my bookshelf, and all of the rest of them. So that was quite fascinating to do a deep dive in that in connection to these types of transits that people go through.
Have you done any work with sacred oils?
Yes, I have. Yes,
I
and I
thought
do also. Pardon me. Sorry.
I thought you might have done.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I have a whole, at the end of each chapter, there is a whole list of correspondences that does go with the particular transit. So yes, definitely looking at the different essential oils for calming. So here again, where I'm just looking at the Uranus opposition. So again, between around 42 and 44. But so a lot of times people feel anxiety during that time. So oils such as lavender and chamomile, clary sage, lemon balm again can all be very calming and help gently reset the nervous system. And also stones as well, crystals and stones for each particular time period. So I'm just sitting on this chapter right now. So I will say for allies and correspondences for the Uranus opposition, we have clear topaz, moldavite, sapphire, scapolite, among others. So many different tools. In fact, I do call, there's a particular part in each chapter called a magical toolkit for whatever time you're going through. So you can tap into those things and bring in all the allies that you might need, I think, to move through that time.
What I love about this, I'm going to call it a holistic approach, because you're bringing in, plants and crystals and oils. What I like about it is that it's, I guess, reviving that practice, which a very, very, very long time ago, the astrologer Physic would have
Mhm.
engaged with, it would have been about bringing in the plants and everything else that goes with it. And we kind of
Mhm.
stepped away from that. But there is still, I think, a very exciting and valid reason to reconnect with that tradition.
I agree with that. Absolutely. I think it's incredibly illuminating when you start moving in holistically into other areas that correspond with the signs or the astrological transits, and it can be just really helpful in getting deeper into those archetypes and all sorts of other things as well that are very helpful.
I have found myself that bringing in things like crystals, etc., has
Mhm.
an incredibly powerful effect. And people could say that it's, that ritual is in itself placebo, that, bringing in other things like crystals, etc.,
Mhm.
that's placebo. I believe it's much more than that. But
Mhm.
even as placebo, it would be an amazing way of accessing the energy that we're dealing with from the point of
Mhm.
view of the planets and turning it into something that's palpable, which then means you're bringing the unconscious to the conscious, which of course is at the heart of the healing journey.
I absolutely agree. I think that aligning with corresponding stones, minerals, plants, oils, etc., it really can bring us to a deeper level in understanding where we're at in that healing transpersonal journey.
I think also there's another value to it from the point of view that sometimes, well, I guess often, there are points where we feel a bit helpless. And to be able to engage in something that's tangible and physical, I think helps us tap into that right brain part of us
Mm.
in a way that's
Mhm.
very creative and which takes away the feeling of helplessness and turns us then into a participant, a co-creator, which in itself, again, is very, very powerful.
Yes, it's engaging at I think, the deepest possible levels. And yes, I do absolutely agree with what you said there. It's very helpful to be in alignment with the places that we're at in life, really looking at the underlying developmental purpose of where we're at. And these other things, these correspondences, they're like practical ways of moving through. So there is that, and it is all connected, isn't it? So it's the practical, this is connected with the spiritual. The earth is connected with, I mean, I think that astrology is a sacred marriage between heaven and earth, and there is really no division between the two. So,
The the connection with the earth, I think, is utterly stunning because we're looking at um, bringing in that connection through plants. And I can
mhm,
think of nothing more beautiful than, what I do, growing my own herbs and thinking about
mhm,
going to use them for. And
yes.
the crop of lavender each July is always something I look forward to. Chamomile,
Mhm,
and taking the chamomile flowers and mixing them with oats and putting them into little muslin bags that I can put into the bath and keep
mhm,
some back, in case, one of us has dry skin or some sort of skin condition that needs soothing.
mhm.
All of this is such a pure act of love and healing. And to think of that then as combining with the transits is inspiring, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I do too. Yes.
So I didn't take your birth details ahead of time,
Mm.
and so I don't have your chart, but tell us, what sign are you?
Sure. That's so funny. Nobody ever asks me that. I'm always the one
Well,
asking other people. Yeah. I was born on March 22nd, 1966 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada at 11:15 p.m.
so
Yeah.
you're a Pisces then.
I'm right on the cusp of Pisces and Aries. So I'm
Okay,
I'm actually in Aries, but very just barely. Yes.
just barely. And
Yes.
and is there much earth in there?
In my chart?
Hmm.
Not a lot. I have the Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo at the top of my chart, conjunct my midheaven in Virgo. So there's that Earth. And I do have my North Node is in Taurus, which I
Okay.
am really beginning to love and cultivate and just really settling into. So yes.
Well, that was what I was wondering. I was wondering where's the Virgo and where's the Taurus because I could hear it. And so
Really? Okay, good.
there it
Mm,
is, right at the top of your chart, this Virgo
yes.
entity with Pluto and Uranus there, and then a North Node in Taurus that says, by hook or by crook, you're going to learn about the land
Yes.
and
Yes, yes,
in it. Oh, that's
yes. And
absolutely.
fairly recently, we did move, like I mentioned in the beginning, we've moved to a little island from the city. And yes, it's been quite an interesting thing just being, I wish I could show you. I'm sitting here looking at ocean and mountains and trees, and it's just such a different vibe. And it really feels good with that Taurus North Node, I have to say. It feels right.
Yes, I
Yes.
can see that it would do. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for joining us on Lightways today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Nice to
The
meet
book
you.
the book that we are discussing is A Lantern in the Dark, and I will put a link to that in the description box. Danielle, if people wanted to find you, do you have a website?
Yes, I do. My website is danielleblackwood.com. And if you would like to join me on Instagram, I'm a relative newcomer to Instagram, so I'm at Danielle Blackwood Astrologer. That would be lovely.
That's fantastic. I'll be putting that in the description box as well. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting.
And thank you all for watching. And if you want to learn more about astrology, do please get in touch. I've always got something going on. And until next time, have a fantastic week.